Good evening, everybody, and without further ado, let's take a look at the highlights of this 2012 Ontario budget. Starting with the deficit. That's what the government says it's all about. The deficit in 2011-2012 clocks in at $15.3 billion. And as we go through the years, the Liberals insist that by the year 2017-2018, they are still on track to balance the Ontario budget. It's not going to happen through explosive growth rates, that for sure, because this year they're anticipating a growth rate, last year anyway, of 1.8%, 1.7% this year, and 2.2% next year. So revenues are not going to be buoyant. What's that going to do to the unemployment rate? Not a heck of a lot. Last year, 7.8%, this year, 7.7%, and even as the economy sort of improves, the unemployment rate only projected to drop about 1.1% over the next few years. Where are the savings going to come from? Well, first and foremost, teachers. They're putting teachers on a 2-year wage freeze, at least they hope to. No increases on the grid for 2 years, an end to the generous sick leave plan that teachers have. They would like the teachers to remember, however, that the government has hired more than 13,000 of them since they took over in 2003. And there is this admonition. We are prepared, the government says, to propose necessary administrative and legislative measures to protect the public from service disruptions. How about more pay freezes? Yes, MPPs are getting their pay frozen for 2 more years. That would bring it to 5 years in total. But this one's new. 2 more years for executives at hospitals, colleges, universities, school boards, and agencies for 4 years in total of pay freezes. On pensions, they will reduce future pension benefits rather than asking taxpayers to contribute more. This is a first as well. The Ontario Drug Benefit Plan is going to be income tested for the first time ever. If you're a senior making more than $100,000 a year or a high-income senior couple making more than $160,000 a year, you will pay more of the cost of your prescription medication. The government estimates that'll affect 5% of senior population. However, it doesn't come into effect until August of 2014 and will only save $30 million. Other savings, the government plans to delay and cancel infrastructure projects for a savings of $3 billion. 4 hospital projects are going to be canceled. West Lincoln Memorial, that's in Tim Hudak's riding. Sunnybrook Health Sciences, South Bruce Grey Health Centre, and the Wingham District. That's saving more than $500 million. Health spending, they insist, will be held to 2.1% increases over the next couple of years. That's per year over the next couple of years. We'll still spend $48.4 billion on health care this year. And 9 ministries are going to see their budgets cut. Everything from the environment to municipal affairs and housing, infrastructure, tourism, culture and sports, economic development and innovation. However, the government disregarded some of Drummond's recommendations. For example, they are keeping untouched Ontario's clean energy benefit, full-day kindergarten, the cap on class sizes, the much vaunted 30% off Ontario tuition grant, and the corporate income tax rate stays at 11.5%. There will be no further corporate income tax cuts in this budget. And joining us now from his office in the Frost Block on Queen's Park Crescent in downtown Toronto, Ontario's Minister of Finance, Dwight Duncan, the MPP for Windsor-Tecumseh. And Minister, let me just thank you again for joining us. We're usually, actually, we're always your last stop on Budget Day, and we appreciate you keeping the tradition alive.
Always glad to be with you, Steve.
You did say in your budget lockup today, and here's the quote, "This is the most sweeping budget this province has ever seen." And my question is, really?
Absolutely. You're seeing $17.7 billion in cost containment and savings over 3 years, $4.9 billion in cost cuts over 4 years, sweeping changes to public sector pension, an undertaking to get to zeros on wages and benefits across the broader public sectors. A new document you would have noticed today in the addendum to the budget, which defines line by line where the money's coming from. I think this is an important seminal budget for Ontario's future. It's a strong plan that will get us back to balance in the timeframes we've laid out that will protect the gains we've made in education and healthcare.
At some point, some pundit is going to point out that Mike Harris came into office in 1995 and cut severely. And they will point out that you are now coming into office and cutting severely. And they will ask, what's the difference?
Well, first of all, Mike Harris compared nurses to hula hoop workers. we respect nurses and teachers. Mike Harris cut welfare rates by 21%. We reject that. We've kept welfare rates where they're at. We've laid out a plan that, after having built and made enormous gains in education and healthcare, we've laid out a plan that will allow us to protect those gains. And so tone and tenor is extremely important at this point in time. This is not about demonizing public servants or teachers. This is about working together to build a better future, to ensure that the gains we've made in education, smaller class sizes, better test scores, higher graduation rates, that we maintain those. This is about transforming healthcare. This is about moving funding away from an institution-based system to a patient-based system. So Steve, these are challenges we're calling on all Ontarians, and I believe they will respond well to this. Let's work together. Let's build that better future and get back to balance, because that's the most important thing we can do to build a stronger economic future.
You've got the deficit coming in for the fiscal year of 2011-2012, which we're just exiting, at $15.3 billion. And my question is the deficit that big because you guys have a spending problem?
Well, let's compare ourselves to the Harper government. When they came to office, since they've come to office, their expenditures have gone up 65%. In that same period of time, our expenditures have gone up 65%. We responded in the middle of the greatest downturn since the Great Depression with heavy stimulus. We protected the auto sector. We continued to make investments to keep people working. Those were the right choices to make. Now, having started to get back to balance, and we're now in the third year of our plan, and we've overachieved in each of the years. That is, the deficit target has been better than we set out in the 2010 budget. Now we're taking the next steps to make sure that we continue down that path. And that allows us to continue to build on the gains we've made in education and healthcare, as well as transform the way government does business. I mean, that's a big part of this budget that hasn't had a lot of attention today, but we're going to do government very differently, be more efficient, more effective, as I said in the budget speech today, and that's all about a better future for all Ontarians.
Since you've made the comparison to the Harper government, let me pick up on that, because their deficit projections for next year are quite different from their deficit that they realized last year. Your deficit projection for next year is $100 million different from the year we've just come off. And I guess my question is, are you really telling us that you can only make $100 million of progress on the deficit year over year?
I'm telling you that I've got very cautious assumptions built into the budget. I'll remind you that federal government has had to extend their balance period by 1 year. We stay on track. I'll also remind you, and I borrowed a page from I think the greatest finance minister in the history of this country, Paul Martin. I borrowed a page from Paul Martin. That is, set targets and overachieve every year. So far we've done that. As I say, we're now $1 billion below where we said we would be initially in last year's budget. And I have great confidence that, given the prudence we've built in, that we should be able to do similar things down the road. However, we do live in a very uncertain world. I mean, since the last budget, growth projections by the private sector have fallen dramatically as a result of the situation in Europe, rising commodity prices, and so on. So there's greater prudence built into this budget. Mr. Drummond called for that. More reserve built into this budget. It's cautious, it's careful, and I believe we will continue to meet and exceed the targets we've set out each and every year.
But for those who've always looked at Ontario as a place to stand and a place to grow and the leader of Confederation and so on, we had Premier Jean Charest from Quebec come to Toronto, I guess a couple of weeks ago, to give a speech in which he told us that the most indebted province in Canada, that's his province, Quebec, would balance its books by next year. But you want another 6 years to balance the books. How can that be?
Well, first of all, we're net contributors to Confederation. We're the largest contributor to equalization when you look at what we put in versus what we take out. We've also been able to grow our economy, and we'll continue to grow it. We're taking a prudent approach. We've met or exceeded our targets in each year, and I'm quite confident that Ontario will remain the biggest part of Confederation. It's 40% of the economy, You know, 25 years ago, banks were headquartered in Montreal. They're here in Toronto now. And so we're going to continue to grow. I'm quite confident that we've got the right plan, that our government's plan is going to serve Ontarians well.
Minister, you ready to talk about teachers?
Sure.
Here we go. You have some tough medicine in here for teachers, starting with the 2-year wage freeze, continuing with no moving up the grid, continuing with an end to their generous sick leave benefits. And there was this that you also put in the budget, which I think caught a lot of people by surprise. Quote, "We are prepared to propose necessary administrative and legislative measures to protect the public from service disruptions." What exactly does that mean?
It means that in addition to respecting teachers and our partners in the broader public sectors, we have to respect all taxpayers who need us to get back to balance, who need us to do that in a fair and responsible way. Most importantly, we want to respect the number of teachers in classrooms. You know, if we followed what Mr. Hudak wants to do, getting rid of full-day learning, that would cost us 7,000 teachers across the province, and that would be mostly younger teachers. If we follow Mr. Hudak's advice on raising class sizes, that would cost us another 3,000 teachers. If we do what Mr. Drummond and Mr. Hudak want to do, we would lay off 10,000 support workers in school boards across Ontario. We choose not to do that. You know, there were 362 recommendations in Drummond's report. We've acted on half of them today. We've said no to 9 of them. The other half are longer term in nature, require more study. But we think we've got the right mix. It's a strong plan for a better future that protects the gains we've made in education and healthcare.
But I got to follow up on that, because you say on the one hand you respect teachers, and I believe that you do. You have demonstrated over 8 years that you have respect for teachers. But on the other hand, you say, take 0, or we've got this hammer waiting for us, waiting for you rather, in our back pocket. How does that show respect?
I think it shows respect because we want to protect teaching jobs. We want to build on the gains we've made. Remember, we're not asking for large cuts here. We're asking for a pause. We're protecting defined benefit pension plans. We're protecting, young teachers in the classroom. I come from a place where a lot of people lost their jobs, had their benefits cut, and that's happened across the private sector. You know, we had good agreements with our teachers in 2004 and 2008, and working together, we've been able to build a better education system. We want to preserve that and protect that. We need their help. We'd prefer not to have to go to legislation, but again, this is not about one union or one federation. It's about what's in the interest of all Ontarians. We think this is a strong plan that will keep teachers in the classroom, nurses in hospitals and healthcare sector, and allow us to get back to balance as we protect the important gains we've made in those vital public services that all of us want to see strong.
Okay, Minister, consistent with our approach here, we do 80% on policy and then maybe 20% on politics. So let me ask you a couple of political questions before we go here. How can you put that line in a budget which for a New Democrat is the most poisonous of poison pills, and really expect to get any NDP votes for this budget?
Well, first of all, there's nothing in the budget bill that deals with this. Those are separate items. Okay, so remember that. So there's structure. And I want to, by the way, say I thought Ms. Horvath was very reasonable today, and we knew that there would be some challenges for them in this. We've also frozen corporate taxes. Mr. Hudak seems to want an election 5 months after the last one, even though we're doing many of the things that he asked us to do. It was kind of odd watching him today and watching the reaction of some conservatives around the province who really don't know what he's doing. So I'll look forward to her proposals. What I haven't heard from the NDP is, where are they going to make the changes, the transformation in government? What their proposals are leading to is just keep spending at the levels we're spending. In fact, they're calling for more spending in a number of areas. What it implies, large tax increases, probably the HST. You know, the conference board pointed out that if we raise the HST 6 points, that is, take it from 13 to 19%, we could get back to balance without any of the transformation that we're undertaking here today. We just don't agree with that. I do want to, however, acknowledge that I thought Ms. Horvath had a very reasonable and thoughtful response today, and that gives me hope that we'll be able to work together to get through this. I don't think Ontarians want an election. I certainly don't want an election. But you know what? If the opposition insists on it, we will take this plan to the people, because I think most Ontarians will see this as fair and balanced and a strong plan to build a better future for Ontario.
So just play that out for us then. You guys are obviously going to vote for it. The Conservatives have said every single one of their members will show up to vote against. The NDP say they want to consult with the public before figuring out what to do. How does this all play out?
Well, that'll be up to the opposition. And Mr. Hudak has clearly said he wants an election. That's
well, he hasn't said
regrettable.
that. In fairness, he hasn't said that. He's just said
Yes,
the budget isn't good enough to
you
support.
vote against the budget. When you vote against the budget, I'm sorry, it's a confidence matter. And he'll get that opportunity in about, I think, 7 or 8 sessional days when it comes to a vote on the motion. So that's what he's saying. And in spite of the fact that we've dealt with many of the things he's proposed, I think the NDP and Ms. Horvath have taken a much more responsible approach. I don't think Ontarians want an election. But if the opposition force one, we will take this plan to the people. We think it's the right plan. It's a strong plan that's fair, balanced, and reasonable, and will allow us to get back to balance as we protect the important gains we've made in education and health care.
Minister, as always, we thank you for coming on TVO on Budget Night, your last stop on Budget Night, and good luck going forward. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Always good to be with you.
Up next, we'll examine whether this budget will in fact pass in Ontario's minority legislature, right after this.
You know, Ontario families make difficult choices every day. Every day they make responsible decisions for themselves to create a better future for their families, their children, and their grandchildren. Mr. Speaker, we choose to do what Ontarians themselves are doing. We are taking a good, hard look at our financial circumstances. We are thoughtfully examining the choices we can make today that will best position us for long-term success. Because when we make the right choices about our government's finances, we will balance the budget. The right choices create confidence among investors and the markets. When we make investments in a strong, well-trained, and healthy workforce, it creates confidence among the businesses that want to set up shop and create jobs here in Ontario. The McGuinty government's plan will create a stronger economy, a better quality of life, and a better future for all Ontario families.
Finance Minister Dwight Duncan from the House about 4 hours ago. Joining us now on the debate, Yasser Naqvi, the Liberal MPP for Ottawa Centre, Peter Sherman, the PC MPP for Thornhill, Jagmeet Singh, NDP member for Bramalea Gore-Malton, and Adam Radwanski, Queen's Park columnist with the Globe and Mail. And it's good to welcome all four of you back here to TVO. Adam, I want to start with you. Let's do a few questions, you and me, just to set up for the more partisan discussion to come. You're a newspaper guy, so give us the big picture here. What's the lead for you?
I think the lead is that what Mr. Duncan did today is a pretty good first step out of the fairly giant hole that Ontario is in. But that I think the next steps are going to get a lot harder, and there's a lot less certainty about the province's ability to take them. I mean, no question there are quite a few short-term measures in that budget. You know, the corporate tax freeze is one of them. Cancelling some infrastructure projects that were planned is another. Freezing hospitals' global budgets is another. But a lot of what the government is counting on are really long-term things. I would include the wage freeze in that, which is going to come up through contract negotiations for several years. Pension reform, reining in post-secondary budgets, and in particular healthcare, which they're pegging at just 2.1% annual growth, which is very low and fairly vague how they're going to do that. And the challenge is these things get harder the further we get from today. Partly it's hard for governments to maintain their will on these things to begin with. We've also got a minority government, and every day that passes, we're a little bit closer to a provincial election. And every day that passes, there's going to be more and more pressure on the Premier, on the Finance Minister, on others, from even within their own party, to not pick too many fights, not alienate too many supporters, because that's going to hurt their chances to get reelected.
To the extent that there was a missed opportunity in this budget, something they perhaps ought to have done but didn't do, what would it be?
I would have liked to see more on healthcare. I think, you know, it's great to set a target like that at 2.1% growth, but, you know, the past year it grew by 6%. That's more the standard level.
They claimed they got it to 3 and change last year.
They did in 2 last year, then it went back up to about 5 or 6. Now that may be a bit of an aberration. But when they set it at 3% last year, we all said that seems kind of ambitious. Now they've set it to 2.1%. You know, in the short term, that may be doable, particularly with negotiations with doctors. Perhaps they can get some concessions there, perhaps freezing those global budgets of hospitals in the short term. In the long term, I'm still not totally clear on how it is that they're going to achieve that. And I would have liked to see, and I'd still like to see from the health minister and others, more specificity on what exactly the health reforms mean.
Was there one thing in the budget today that you looked at and said, didn't expect that?
I would say the hint that a legislated wage freeze would have to be up there. That's something that I thought they had moved away from or had rejected, that the Conservatives have been pushing. They're not going quite as aggressively as the Tories, and that they seem to be suggesting they'll try and go through negotiations. If those don't pan out, then they'll impose that, although that's a little bit of a dubious distinction because it is, as you said earlier, a big hammer to hold over any negotiations. But I thought that was a little surprising. Then again, they did hint at that. I mean, in the tone they've taken with teachers, who are pretty much their best union allies, we could see a bit of that. I'm still surprised because they previously dismissed that as more of a short-term measure.
Okay. Peter Sherman, let's get you in on this now. What's your lead?
My lead is too much of nothing, more of same. This is kicking the can down the road, in the words of my leader, Tim Hudak, this afternoon. We're looking at a situation where we have a jobs crisis, where we have a financial crisis, where people are looking for relief. And what we got was a little bit more revenue, a little bit more spending, a little bit less of a deficit, but not enough to really make much of a difference. 15 billion, give or take, for each of the next 2 years. So not really making a dent in very much. And watching something like, for example, the interest that the province pays on its debt at 10 billion and a bit this year, going to 10 billion 600 million next year, an additional 600 million in interest. Why? To service that debt that keeps on mounting. We cannot have that. We have 600,000 people not working in the province of Ontario. We were looking for a jobs plan. They offered very little by way of that, another blue ribbon panel, and that's what we mean by kicking the can down the road, that kind of thing. We were looking for a wage freeze, at least with us, whether you like, if you're a union and you don't like the idea of a wage freeze, we're clear. We want to freeze wages for 2 years. We believe that unionized labor, we have nothing against unionized labor per se, but we think that they should be in the same boat as everybody else in Ontario and take one for the team. That's it.
Jagmeet, how about you?
I think one of the big concerns is the budget falls short on job creation. I agree with my colleague here that that's one issue that it's on the top of the minds of Ontarians. In addition, I mean, with healthcare, there aren't any healthcare reforms. We have a healthcare system that could benefit from reforms that would more effectively use the resources that we put into it. I'd like to see more home care, taking some of the burden off of the hospitals and transitioning that into direct care for seniors and for people in their own homes. I think in one of the largest concerns is affordability. Day-to-day life affordability, that was not addressed in the budget, and it should have been addressed. As times are very difficult for families in Ontario, and though times are difficult in terms of the economy and the debt, we must take care of people even though times are difficult.
Yes, sir, you've heard some of the criticism. What's your response?
Well, what we have presented is strong action for Ontario, a fair and balanced plan a responsible plan to balance the books in next 5 years. The single most important thing we can do for our economy right now, Steve, is to eliminate the deficit. And through this budget, we are making choices to maintain and protect the gains that we have made in healthcare and education, while also eliminate this deficit in next 5 years. And we have presented a very strong and robust plan to do so.
Peter, one of the things that Dwight Duncan just said in that interview was, by voting against this budget, you are expressing a lack of confidence in this government, which means you're ready to go back to the polls. Is that how you'd interpret it?
That's his interpretation. My interpretation is that we've always expressed a lack of confidence in this government, and he's given us no reason today to assume a new confidence in this government. Having said that, if we should wind up going back to the polls, which I assure you, I and all of my colleagues, I'm sure of all stripes, don't want to do 5.5 months after the last election.
So then support the budget.
It's not a question of supporting the budget. We cannot go against principles like that. If there's an election, let it be absolutely clear, it is on Dwight Duncan and Dalton McGuinty, not on Tim Hudak.
Well, but Tim Hudak says he's voting against this budget, period, full stop, and will have every single Tory MPP come in the House to do so. No 24-hour flues for any of you. That suggests that he's taking this power unto himself
It suggests,
to turn it down.
No, Steve, it suggests that he has a caucus that is fully supportive of the principles for which we stand. You can like our principles, or maybe you don't like our principles, whoever you happen to be. We have principles. We believe that the Liberals govern by weather vane. And so today it happens to be a handy-dandy little thing to please the Conservatives by putting in something on maybe we'll legislate a wage freeze because we've been calling for a mandatory wage freeze. Maybe we'll fix the arbitration system in some way where we find the approach completely deficient. You've got to address us on our terms. You've got to listen to some of the things that we have to say. You, Liberals, are a minority government. We, between ourselves and the NDP, albeit we are of different political stripes, carry some weight on behalf of people in Ontario, and by the way, that weight happens to be more than half of the people of Ontario.
Okay, Jagmeet, your party's position has been, as of today, we're going to wait and see. We want to consult the people, we want to see what the people have to say about this budget, and then we'll tell you how we're going to vote in the legislature. Why is that an acceptable response on this day?
I think it's important to note that we had a mandate. The electors chose a minority government in Ontario. That was their choice. And if given their choice, in respecting that mandate, we must find a way to work together. That's what the Ontarians want. That's what the people of Ontario want. That's what we have to do. So our approach is this. We've seen time and time again that the Liberal government hasn't consulted properly with the people, and that's what we want to do. We want to consult with our constituents, with the people of Ontario, find out where they're at, find out what they want. Is this a budget that falls short in terms of their needs? And if it does, then we have to act accordingly.
Two very different approaches here.
Well, and I have to say, this is a peculiar situation because you've actually got a budget that I would suggest certainly tilts toward the right. There's certainly quite a bit in there you would think the Conservatives would like, with the exception of the corporate tax freeze. May not go as far as they want, but you would think is along the lines they'd want, and they've immediately signaled they won't support it. There's very little in there I would say the NDP would naturally want to support, with the exception of that corporate tax freeze. And yet they seem to be at least keeping an open mind on supporting it. There's a weird kind of reversal here.
What does that tell you?
Well, I think it tells you that, I mean, with all respect to Peter and his party, look, there was never much question the Conservatives were going to vote for this budget. I mean, we knew that as media from very shortly after the last election.
Because the official opposition has to oppose.
Well, it does, but also it was telegraphed pretty quickly. I think they're wary of winding up in kind of the Stéphane Dion trap that we saw federally with the Liberals, where you don't want to look weak, you oppose, but then you pull a member back or two, and you look like you're actually kind of supporting the government, not ready to stand up to them. That's kind of forced the NDP's hand, where they don't want an election either. I don't think either opposition party truthfully wants an election, but it's kind of been left to the NDP to avoid going too far down the same road, and so they're trying to figure out how much can they put up with. While at the same time, it's going to be really hard for them to sell what's in this budget to a lot of their supporters if they do vote for it.
Well, let's talk turkey here for a second, Yasser. The fact of the matter is your party's, what, $5 million in debt, and your party's $4 million in debt, and your party's a few. Everybody's got millions that they still owe from the last election. None of you is in a position financially right now to go to the polls. So why are we having all this brinksmanship here?
Well, I don't know. We were just elected, minority government. So people have decided they want us to work together, and they want us to make sure that we deal with the issue around deficit, and do so in a fashion that is responsible. And I think that is the key for all three political parties, that this is not a war on public sector. This is not balance the book by gutting public services like healthcare and education. Find a responsible, fair mechanism by which you can eliminate the deficit. And we've done our homework. We have done a lot of work in putting together this budget. That's why we've taken a prudent approach in terms of time frame,
Okay,
5 years.
Tell me this, because you said a minority parliament, you got to work together. And the Premier did have a conversation with Tim Hudak on the phone and with Andrea Horwath on the phone. Sort of feel them out and see what might be of their interest that would end up in the budget. What's in this budget today that you think the Conservatives could sign on to and therefore vote for this?
Well, I think there's, Mr. Hudak earlier today was talking about there are no structural changes. I think that was the argument that he was raising. I think there's a lot in this budget we're doing. Look at the spending line, how significantly we're reducing growth in spending. We're bringing it down, program spending increase to 1% moving forward. That is significant in the manner in which
They have held the line on spending as they haven't in the past 8 years. Is that nothing you can hang your hat on?
That's what they say.
Well, that's what the budget documents say.
That's my point. That's what they say. We've seen budget documents from this particular finance minister. This would be his 5th year. We haven't seen him come close to balance, but we've always heard a good story about how he's going to hold the line. This is arguably a budget that presents a lesser number than what he's done before, but we have no reason to believe that the deficit is going to be held to $15 billion, and only Dwight Duncan could celebrate a deficit of $15 billion. Let me say in response to my colleague Yasser, that working together means occasionally sitting down and actually listening. Now, he knows and I know that we have sat down on several occasions. And we have.
Who's the we?
We is me and Yasser and Minister Duncan. And as has Premier McGuinty and my leader, Tim Hudak. And we have expressed ideas, and not just one or two, many ideas. They're on the table. You know what they are.
Anything in that budget today that says, oh, you were listening to me, and that's in there because we talked to you?
There was nodding, a passing nod. For example, the idea of legislating a wage freeze if you don't come to the table, which you explored quite significantly with the minister. That is not a mandatory wage freeze. That's rattling a saber. And I've got to tell you, in my own straw poll, talking to some union leaders I know who happen to be in attendance, they're not really very happy. So I think that Yasser Naqvi and Dwight Duncan and their government have a heck of a lot of trouble coming their way, because at the end of the day, this is not working together, and that's why I say that if an election should eventuate, this is going to be entirely on Dalton McGuinty.
Well, Jagmeet, let me find out from you. Your leader had a conversation with Dalton McGuinty. Is there anything in the budget that you could point to today that says, that's there because we wanted it there, and therefore we can support that?
I mean, just to start off, it does fall short on a lot of issues that we've raised, and it raises concerns. One area where they've taken some of our guidance is the idea of freezing corporate tax. That makes sense. I mean, given the climate, it doesn't make any sense to put all the burden on working families, on the public sector. It makes sense to spread across this burden.
I think he put that in there for his backbenchers more than for yours, but that's another story.
That is another story, I'm sure. But I mean, that's a step in the right direction. That's a little step in the right direction. There's still a lot that's lacking in this. But what we're saying very clearly, as opposed to other parties' positions, that we're open to negotiation. We're open to talking this through. There's a lot of room for improvement in this. We're very concerned about the idea of forcing people, taking away the right to strike. That's very concerning. So we want to sit down and have further negotiations, hear from the people of Ontario, and also have further discussions with the Liberal Party.
Truthfully, though, what can you learn from the people of, and I know Andrew Horwath's going to have a news conference tomorrow morning and explain how this consultation with the people is going to go. But what can you learn in the next 10 days that you already don't know about how people feel about this government?
Well, I guess it's not about the government in general, it's about this budget in particular. We want to hear some feedback from the people directly. Instead of just making our own decisions in our closed-door meetings, we really want to engage the public because it's about them. We're here, we're elected to serve the people of Ontario. And if we don't know what their voice and what their concern is on this issue, then we're not doing our jobs properly.
Let me find out from Adam. Is that smart politics or is that chicken politics?
Well, it wasn't surprising politics. I have to say that, I mean, the only surprise there was I thought that Ms. Horwath would come out today and say that she was going to talk to her caucus and come back. Instead, she said she'd talk to the public and come back. Look, I actually don't think it's a bad line. I mean, her decision, if she were to vote and her caucus were to vote against that budget en masse, and the Conservatives did likewise, and force an election, it's not a bad thing to find out in advance what the public thinks about that. Now, truthfully, I suspect people look more at opinion polls than they do at other exercises. I do want to come back for a second in terms of the Premier's consultation on this before. I would say that in terms of the extent to which he would have engaged Mr. Hudak before, that may have been a lost cause from the get-go, frankly, based on the way that the tone was set. I would say that in the case of the NDP, arguably he should have made a little more of an effort to engage them. Now, granted, there was never a whole lot in this budget that they were going to support. The nature of it, the austerity nature of it, wasn't really going to appeal. But the fact that he only spoke to her last Thursday, after the budget had already been written, probably wasn't the best way to at least send a signal that they were looking to cooperate. And I do wonder a little bit if the Liberals took for granted the NDP would support it.
Let's go to that, Yasser. I mean, does it look like you did a perfunctory consultation with the opposition parties, but given that you're sitting on top, albeit a minority government, just short by one seat
Would
of
have loved a major majority government.
You got a major minority government. Should you have been obliged to consult a little more seriously than you did?
Well, we spoke with both opposition parties. The Premier spoke with both the leaders, but
but
most
not
importantly,
seriously. Not seriously.
we spoke to Ontarians. That's what matters the most. In the end of the day, it's not about the NDP, it's not about the Conservatives, it's not about the Liberals. It's about the people of Ontario and what they want. And we spoke to them by pre-budget consultation. We spoke to them through live tele town halls, hundreds of thousands of people. And we asked them what you want to see in a budget. And people told us again and again, they put premium on their public services like healthcare and education, and that's what they want protected. We made a lot of gains over the last 8 years, and we were told that's what needs to be protected. And that's why we made certain choices. We made choice to keep full-day kindergarten. We have made choice to keep caps on class sizes, the 30% tuition of post-secondary education, better care, healthcare at a community level, more patient-focused, community-centered care. Those are the things that we're investing because that's what people of Ontario want.
I've got to say, with all due respect to my friend Mr. Nakvi, where Ontarians are concerned and consultations are concerned, there's something that's gone on for decades called pre-budget consultations, where groups get a chance to go to a committee called the Standing Committee on Finance, which travels the province, and we listen to their concerns, and that informs the budget process. There were no such consultations this year, and the reason was because the government of Dalton McGuinty purposefully held up the creation of the Standing Committee on Finance and every other committee so that we couldn't do those consultations.
That is true. You'll acknowledge that,
So
right?
the bottom
That's true.
line is,
Well,
you
this
held
is
your
true,
own
but
consultations, and they were
because
liberal
all three political
consultations.
parties did not agree on how to create committees. We were ready to create committees. We can get into those kind of inside baseball things. Fact of the matter is that the Minister of Finance himself personally spoke with, through using technology, which is readily available, with hundreds of thousands of people across the province.
Okay, but
And
finish the point.
listen to them.
Hang on.
Excuse
Peter's going
me.
to finish the point, then Jugme.
He's the Minister of Finance. He's not God. The bottom line is I got pre-budget consultation submissions unsolicited in my office, probably 4 dozen of them, from groups that were begging to be heard and were never heard because you picked and chose the people who were going to inform your budget process. You also said your budget process would be informed by the Drummond report, and now I hear the minister claiming that half of those recommendations were addressed. Well, they were addressed by, in most cases, throwing them out. The Drummond report was, in the word I use today, a scam. It was a diversion tactic, as your party uses constantly, to push ahead by a year the whole idea of what was going to go on in Ontario and buy you an election, and it did.
Jugmeet?
Well, I think we should base our arguments on the facts. The fact is that pre-budget hearings normally take place. They did not take place. That's a fact. The Standing Committee on Finance does normally do that. That didn't happen. So when we're talking about true consultation with the public, that didn't occur. I mean, that's something we have to agree with. And that's something that's troubling. I mean, we need to hear from the public before we make these decisions. That process, which has been going on for at least 10 years, didn't occur this time, and that's a concern.
Would you agree with this observation, Yasser, which is that the government, by announcing on budget day that if teachers didn't come to an agreement on their own, that this government would legislate them back to work, you know that's something the NDP just cannot abide, right? They are dead meat if they go on, if they sign on to that. You need at least 2 votes from the other side of the House to pass this budget. How can you put that poison pill as a part of today's deliberations?
Well, I think, Steve, the key thing in the budget around public sector compensation is respect. The budget says very clearly that we respect our public sector partners, and there's no doubt about it. We have worked very closely with our teachers, we have closely with our nurses, we've worked very closely with our doctors, and we have done a lot together in terms of the gains that we've made in healthcare and education. The budget document talks about respect for the collective bargaining process, and that process is going on, and this does not impact.
You didn't do that. I'm not taking a position here, but I'm just saying your respect for teachers was so significant that the Premier went on YouTube to announce what their bargaining position was. That's not respect, is it?
No, we have a very respectful process that is going on. There is the bargaining table is meeting, and they're discussing issues. That's something that we respect, and we will not short circuit that. And I think the budget document is very clear. But I think what's also important, and that's what the budget was talking about, is respect for Ontarians and their need to eliminate the deficit. And we need to obviously find that right balance in order to ensure that we have quality education in our schools, which we could have not done without the excellent teachers we've got. but we do it in a fiscally responsible fashion.
Let me get Adam on this, because, you know, Senator Hugh Segal once said that, you know, when liberals cut, people cut them slack on it because they figure, well, if liberals are doing it, then we must really need to have it done. Whereas when conservatives do it, they do it with blood dripping out of their fangs, and they do it because they love to do it. Is some of that going on here today?
Sure, there's definitely a Nixon goes to China analogy here. I mean, on the teachers in particular, this is one thing that Mr. McGuinty should actually be very well positioned to do. I mean, for his other shortcomings and other negative views of him publicly, I don't think there's a lot of people who think of him as a mean or nasty guy. That's not even how he's really been portrayed by his opponents. So there's a lot of room there, I think, for him to try and take advantage of the goodwill he's accumulated over the years in order to get a little bit back. And I think if he gets in a fight with teachers or nurses or doctors, I'm not saying he'll necessarily win it, but he should have an easier time than he would if he were conservative. And that maybe is, he wasn't going to make that argument in the last campaign, but perhaps it was one of the better arguments for why he might be able to impose some kind of austerity agenda.
But Yasser has used the word respect numerous times over. Dwight Duncan, in his interview earlier on this program, said respect. We respect the teachers, respect the nurses, respect doctors. Does their approach with this hammer in their back pocket, does that look respectful to you?
No, I don't think it. I don't think that's a way to generate a lot more goodwill, and it does convey a certain willingness to fight. Look, this is a government that, I mean, for all of the very good, what's referred to as stakeholder relations that they do, is willing when it sees an opening to go pretty hard at people. I mean, we saw that 2 years ago when they had a fight with pharmacists in Ontario. That was a group they thought could be easily defeated, so they went after them. I think what we're seeing with teachers now, and we'll see if they stick to it, but is a sense that this kind of partnership they had built with teachers, where they had, A, helped with their brand in terms of peace in schools after the Mike Harris era, et cetera, and B, frankly, helped on their campaigns quite a bit in terms of support, that had maybe a little bit run its course because there could be public pushback now if they were seen to still favor teachers and shelter them from the measures that are needed to cut costs. So, I mean, I'm not saying that Mr. McGuinty's a bad guy, but there is a certain degree of being a fair weather friend, and I think that he's a politician. That is kind of how it works.
Let me talk about the ratio with you for a second, because the government today says that for every dollar of revenue enhancements they've got coming in to reduce the deficit, they've got $4 of spending cuts or spending delays, or that kind of thing, and that you as a conservative ought to kind of appreciate that.
I'm supposed to embrace it, and I'm supposed to love it, and I'm supposed to look at $17.7 billion, I think the number is, spread over the course of 3 years, and using a number of names that I haven't learned yet. There are about 5 or 6 of them that somehow or other address something called conservation or deferral or whatever it happens to be. I don't buy a word of it. I think it's bogus. I think it's made up. And I've seen it so many times before.
Well, really, that's a bit ungenerous, don't you? I mean, it's in black and white in the budget paper.
Pessimistic, isn't it?
Look, we've got a government that's run by a man who makes promises, and those promises are aimed at one thing: getting elected and getting reelected.
It's worked 3 times.
That's correct.
Well.
It has worked 3 times. I can guarantee you it's not going to work a 4th.
No, you can't, actually. You can't guarantee that.
If I have anything to say about it, then we'll
Okay,
all right.
that's different.
The bottom line is I don't take it at face value. What I look at is I look at an overall document and I say, this is a document that I can't accept because it doesn't do 2 things. It doesn't do 2 things that, in effect, you had a compact with the population to do. You were supposed to be able to create jobs so that 600,000 and rising unemployed people could actually be employed in the province of Ontario. For God's sakes, if you put half of them to work, you'd have enough revenue that we wouldn't be having this conversation. And we don't have a jobs plan. And the other thing is to actually take a legitimate cut at making some reductions in spending and taking away some of the waste. One of the best known pieces of advice that we provided during the election was do a review of the ABCs, agencies, boards, and commissions, 600 plus of them. And get rid of the ones that don't work, fix the ones that are broken, and keep the ones that do work. They do this like they do everything else in dribs and drabs. They take credit for the successes, they're few, and they take no responsibility for the negatives. Orange is a good example.
Jagmeet.
I think one of the big problems in the budget is they look at the cost savings and the cost cutting, but let's look at the revenue side. We've heard an amazing suggestion and a proposal by the doctors. We've heard Warren Buffett talk about this as well. Doctors have proposed that look at people who are making over $200,000, and we're ready as doctors. They've come together and released this document saying we're ready to take a 1% increase on our income tax, they're prepared to do that. They're offering that. And the idea is something that the public, I'm sure, is welcome to, or would be welcome to. The idea that those who have the resources, those who have the money, the people who are able to contribute more to society should contribute more. And that's something that's very reasonable. It's something that makes sense. That's not brought up at all in the budget. And that's something that would allay some of the concerns and would address this idea of cutting the deficit down and not cut some of our services, not cut some of our things we need.
Was that considered?
I haven't seen the particular document that Jagmeet is referring to. Our focus has been, of course, is to make sure that we don't put too much pressure on families. We have to look at the spending side of things, and that has been a big focus in this. You mentioned we're bringing down savings or cost containment by about $17.7 billion. We've got about $4.4 billion worth of revenue. So it's a 4-to-1 mix in terms of expenses and revenue. The focus is it's coming up with a responsible plan. It is a balance, and we need to make sure that we get to eliminating deficit while we continue to invest in our healthcare and education.
Peter?
He's not going to eliminate the deficit. It's that simple. Let's go back to Drummond and take it at face value. Let's believe that that report was there to be used, that we should have taken Mr. Drummond totally at face value. It wasn't just about 362 recommendations. It was about an instruction, and the instruction said, if you follow this recipe, you will bake the cake and it'll be perfect. You'll arrive at 2017-18 and you'll have a balanced budget. You don't have to take all 362, he said. You can change.
If you take something out, you got to put something else back in.
You got to put something back.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. They didn't even come close to doing that. And the bottom line,
They did on a few things, Peter. In fairness,
well,
they did.
well, we can talk about a few things, but we're talking about a big picture. And in the big picture here, we're not going to make it. We're heading towards a $30 billion deficit in 2014. We're heading towards a $400 billion plus provincial debt. We're going to be at $280 billion by their own numbers within 2 years.
Not with the measures we've introduced. And here's another point I want to say. Peter has said this a couple of times. We do have a track record of eliminating deficit, and we do have a track record of delivering balanced budgets. In 2003, when we came into office, we inherited a $5.6 billion hidden deficit from the Tories. We eliminated it in 2 years. Next 3 budgets, 2005, 2006, and 2007, were all balanced budgets. And then came the Great Recession. And today's deficit, the projected $15.3 billion deficit that we have, is because of the borrowing we had to do to stimulate the economy. And now we have a task in front of us. That's what our families want, to eliminate this. And we have put forward a very robust, strong plan to do that in the next 5 years.
I find on the Drummond report, which Peter was talking about, I think maybe it's just worth interjecting here that I don't think all the kind of ratios and numbers and everything else about this thing, you know, the Liberals are adopting half of them, they're excluding 9 recommendations, whatever. I think it's frankly a little beside the point. I mean, this thing, A, it wasn't some house of cards where if you pull out one card, the whole thing collapses. Secondly, I mean, a lot of these were, I mean, there was overlap in the recommendations. I mean, it was kind of a catalog of things governments should consider doing, and a lot of them have been floating around forever. I'm not saying the work wasn't good, and there weren't some good ideas in there, but it wasn't per se a prescription of, you know, you must do every one of these things or else. And I will say that I think the general message from that, to the Liberals' credit, I think has been largely adopted, which is you can't do it all deep, quick, across-the-board cuts in 1 year. You have to do it more slowly, more gradually. You have to do structural change to government. Now, at the time when that report was released, I thought it was a little overly ambitious, in the sense that it puts a lot of faith in the ability of government to do transformative change over multiple years to maintain that will, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm not sure, wasn't sure when I thought they could do it, I'm not sure now they can do it. But this idea that they've sort of violated the spirit of Don Drummond or that he's going to have to come down on them heavily, I don't really see it. I don't think it's fair.
Let me go back at Peter on this one more time, because I want to give you an opportunity to say something very generous about this budget today. So let's have a little conversation here.
I'm trying so hard.
I can feel it too. Don Drummond didn't mention a thing in his report about selling the LCBO headquarters, which will realize $300 million. Don Drummond didn't say a thing in his report about means testing seniors for their drug benefit plans. Those are things that are in the budget today, which he didn't recommend, which will save money.
Well,
right?
nobody's going to argue that there are, in any budget, our budget, their budget, the federal budget that we're going to hear over the next 48 hours, that there aren't things that will work selling off the LCBO headquarters. But we're not going to pick and choose one-offs and say, wow, what a great idea. Like I said before, we're going to look at the big picture and we're going to say, are you achieving the goals? Are you creating the jobs that are necessary? corporate tax cuts, which were referred to in a different vein by Jagmeet on behalf of the NDP. We believe that part of the jobs plan is to proceed with the tax cuts to bring it down to 10% so that we are a competitive regime. At this point, what you've essentially done is you slapped the face of small to medium enterprises very particularly, and you said $1.5 billion that you were counting on that would have been economic activity that you could have engaged in, hiring more people, buying more machinery, whatever it might have been, is off the table for you for the next couple of years. This is big picture stuff. So can I say something nice about selling the LCBO headquarters? Sure, why not go ahead and do it? But the bottom line is that's not going to fix your problem.
Jagmeet.
Okay, a couple of things have come up. I want to address a couple of different areas. One is, I mean, the idea that corporate tax cuts will result in job creation has simply been proven to be false. If we look at the track record in Ontario, corporate tax rates have gone consistently downwards, and what's happened alongside that, unemployment has gone up, job loss has gone up. So corporate tax cuts alone will not create jobs. What we do know is that if you tie in corporate tax cuts to some sort of incentive, that there is a job creation incentive tied in with a tax cut, we might see some sort of gains in jobs.
You ran on that, and you took that idea to Dalton McGuinty, and he rejected it.
He rejected it, and that's a big concern. The other thing with the Drummond report, the Drummond report's at its core, it thinks his proposal is that the people want that deficit cutting is the be-all, end-all. That's the most important thing. If we ask people in Ontario, they're still reeling from the effects of the recession. People are still very hard off. People are in difficult circumstances. They need something to help them out. They're looking for making life more affordable. They're looking for a jobs creation plan. They're looking for proper money invested into healthcare. That's what they want. So though the deficit is a concern and it's something we need to address and it's something that's fiscally responsible to do so, we can't lose sight of the fact that people are still reeling from a recession and they're in difficult times and they need to be helped out.
With about 2 minutes to go here, I want to put one thing out there. We're getting all of your tweets tonight, and it's fantastic. But let us know if you think this budget is worth going to the polls over. Do you want to have an election because this budget is so inadequate? Tweet us and let us know. 2 minutes left. Yasser, play this out. What happens?
Well, what happens is there's a budget bill. We're going to debate it in the House. It's going to go to the committee. It is a minority government. Peter and I in particular, because we both sit on the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs, will have a lot of time together to work on this budget bill.
Going to get his vote?
And I'm going to work very, very hard. We get along. We talk to each other. And we need to work, all of us again, to find a way forward. I don't think anybody wants to go to an election.
Okay, play this out.
But we need to eliminate the deficit in the next 5 years, and that's the plan.
Play this out.
I'll start by saying what I said before because I want to make it clear. If there's an election, it'll have to be on Dalton McGuinty, but let's not play that out. Let's take this through the scenario that you just heard from Yasser. He and I do get along. As a matter of fact, it's important that the viewers tonight know that what they see in question period every day or the clips that they see from the House are on some level a form of theatrics that the parties engage in, but that the real work gets done in the committee rooms where there's negotiation, where there's an effort to understand each other. But I've got to tell you, if there's going to be any understanding on the part of our party for a budget that looks like this, it's going to take a heck of a lot of work by Yasser Naqvi.
Adam, last 30 seconds. How does this play out?
I still don't see an election coming out of it, although I will admit that whereas a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago I thought there was no chance of that, I think there's a small chance of it. There's really two ways to avoid it. I mean, either the Tories are not going to vote for this budget. What they might do, still, I'm not convinced they won't pull back a couple of members to avoid it happening if they feel an election's not going to happen. I know they did. The other option is the NDP could vote for it, could abstain, it could pull back a couple of members. My guess is cooler heads will prevail, and frankly, I hope so, partly because I don't want an election, and partly because, frankly, given the state of the finances, I don't think the province really needs to go into turmoil right now.
We're all staying tuned. Good luck to all of you in your deliberations in the days ahead. Thanks to Adam Radwanski from the Globe and Mail and Yasser Naqvi at the Liberal from Ottawa Centre on the left-hand side of the table, Peter Sherman, the PC member for Thornhill, and Jagmeet Singh, the NDP member for Bramalea-Gord-Moulton, on the right-hand side of the table. Good to have you all on TVO tonight.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.